Ever get that icky feeling? Like you're watching a trial play out in the news, but it's way before anyone even sets foot in a courtroom. Judgments being passed left and right. We're talking about trial by media, and today we're taking a deep dive into how this unfolds right here in Taiwan.
Definitely a topic that's, well, very relevant, especially now.
Exactly. And we're using this, well, kind of alarming article from the United Daily News as our jumping off point. It features Professor Wu Jingxin, a legal scholar, and let me tell you, he doesn't hold back.
Yeah, he's known for his strong opinions. He gets straight to the point.
To say the least. But before we get into Professor Wu's arguments, let's set the scene a bit. The article really centers on this principle of confidentiality of investigations. So for our listeners, could you break down what that actually means in the Taiwanese legal system?
Okay, so imagine this. You're a suspect in an investigation. Naturally, you'd want a fair chance, right? To present your case in court with a judge, all your legal rights protected. That's what secrecy is supposed to ensure. It's the idea that certain information about an ongoing investigation, it shouldn't be made public.
So not just splashing every single detail across the headlines before things even get to court.
Right, exactly. It's about protecting the process, not about, shielding criminals or anything like that.
Gotcha. So everyone's on a level playing field. Seems pretty straightforward. But then Professor Wu, he comes out swinging in this article. He says, and I quote, "In Taiwan, confidentiality of investigations is basically a joke." That's a bold statement.
It is, and it really reflects, I think, a growing concern among legal experts in Taiwan.
So what's behind that statement? Why is Professor Wu saying this?
Well, he argues that this principle, this confidentiality, it's routinely undermined here. And get this, he doesn't just blame the media. He points the finger at the authorities themselves, the police, the prosecutors.
He's saying they're the ones leaking information.
Yeah, his argument is that they often feed information to the media, even during an active investigation.
Feed. That's interesting. Like, it's intentional. Why would they do that? What do they gain by, potentially messing with their own investigations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there are a few possibilities. Sometimes it might be about shaping public opinion, creating a certain narrative around a case before the defense has a chance.
Oh, I see. So it's almost like getting ahead of the story.
Exactly. Or there might be pressure on authorities to appear, more proactive, even if it means bending the rules a little bit.
So they're walking a tightrope, trying to balance transparency with, the need to protect the investigation.
It's tough balance. And then there's the media's side of things, too. Why are they so eager to publish information that, ethically speaking, is kind of a gray area?
That's what I was thinking. What's in it for them?
Competition. The media landscape is incredibly competitive. Landing a scoop, being the first one to break a story, that's huge. Drives readership, viewership, and ultimately revenue.
Especially if it's a salacious headline.
Right, exactly. The article highlights how this all gets even more complicated, though, when we start talking about political cases.
Yeah, that's where the stakes get even higher.
Yeah, absolutely. When you bring politics into the mix, well, leaks can become weapons, Used to discredit opponents, sway public opinion. Things can get very messy.
And that's where this whole "you see" thing comes in, right? This idea of presuming guilt before an actual verdict.
Exactly. It's like someone's already been tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, and it's all based on, leaked information.
Yeah.
Stuff that might be taken out of context or even just straight up sensationalized.
And that perception, once it's out there, it's tough to change, huh? Even if, new evidence comes up later on.
It's really hard to shake those first impressions.
Makes you wonder, what recourse do people even have? If this confidentiality of investigations can be brushed aside so easily, where does that leave the average person in Taiwan? What happens to their right to a fair trial, to being presumed innocent until proven guilty?
Those are the big questions, aren't they? And Professor Wu, he really digs into this in the article. He talks about the power dynamics at play. You've got the authorities on one side. They're the ones holding all the cards, especially during the investigation phase.
Right. They've got the evidence, the resources.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have individuals, people who are often caught completely off guard, suddenly thrust into this harsh spotlight.
It's like a David and Goliath situation, except David doesn't even get a slingshot in this scenario.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that gets to the core of Professor Wu's point, Without a real commitment to upholding tisosht, without plugging these leaks, holding people accountable, the scales of justice, they're already tipped.
And that's a scary thought. So what can be done? I mean, the article mentions this law passed back in 2012 that was supposed to strengthen the Sontran.
Right. There was an attempt to kind of codify and reinforce these protections.
But then it says that, and this is wild, no one has ever been prosecuted under that law. No one.
That's a very telling detail. It makes you wonder, is the law itself flawed? Is it just too difficult to enforce?
Or is there a lack of will to actually use it?
It's possible. Or maybe, and this might be even more concerning, maybe there's this unspoken acceptance of how things work,
Yeah.
this transactional relationship between some authorities and certain media outlets.
Right, because sometimes it feels like a story just falls into everyone's lap a little too perfectly. You know what I mean? Like it was, I don't know, orchestrated or something.
It's cynical, but you're not wrong to think that. The fact that there haven't been any prosecutions under this 2012 law, it suggests that there's a gap, a disconnect between what the law says and how these situations actually play out.
The law is only as good as its enforcement, right?
Exactly. And even if it's really tough to prove, to gather enough evidence to show intent, the fact that this law hasn't been used even once, that really speaks volumes.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's a real, genuine desire to tackle this issue. Like, is anyone actually committed to changing things?
Professor Wu seems to be arguing for a fundamental shift in mindset, not just, tweaking the law around the edges.
Because this isn't just about, like, legal technicalities or journalistic practices, right? This is about the kind of society we want to have.
Absolutely. It's about safeguarding the justice system, making sure everyone has a fair shot. No matter what public opinion is, no matter how much media frenzy there is around a case.
So, based on all of this, on your expertise, how would you assess the current state of Oshuapugi in Taiwan?
Well, it's messy, to be honest. It's complicated. There's this ideal, right? This idea of keeping those investigations confidential to protect everyone involved.
Right, like we were saying, a level playing field.
Exactly. But then you have the reality. You know how it is. The authorities, the media, public pressure, it all gets kind of...
Fluid.
Exactly. Fluid. And you have this tension, right? We need some transparency. We got to keep the public informed.
Of course. Of course, we want to know what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it can't come at this cost. You can't jeopardize someone's right to be presumed innocent. You can't let public opinion become the only court that matters.
Like we've been saying, it's a tough balance to strike.
And that's what Professor Wu's article really highlights. This balance, or maybe the lack of it, here in Taiwan.
Yeah, he's not afraid to call it as he sees it.
No, not at all. He's saying, look, if we don't enforce, if we don't start plugging these leaks, holding people accountable, the right to a fair trial, it's at risk here.
And when that's at risk, well, everyone's at risk.
Exactly. People lose trust in the justice system.
Sure.
It creates this climate of fear, suspicion. And then, finding justice, real justice, it becomes that much harder.
It's not just an academic debate then, is it? It's about real people, real lives.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important to remember.
It's been a fascinating deep dive. We really dug into this whole dance between the law, the media, how the public sees things here in Taiwan.
Yeah. And we saw how fragile that presumption of innocence really is, especially when confidentiality of investigations is ignored.
Professor Wu's article, it's critical, sure, but it's also kind of a call to action, isn't it?
Absolutely. Be more discerning about the news we consume. Demand better from our institutions, from each other. Remember that justice, real justice, it has to be fair. It has to be based on due process for everyone, no exceptions.
And that's something worth fighting for.
Couldn't agree more.
We've covered a lot today, and it's clear there's no easy solutions here. This isn't, a problem we can just solve in an hour.
Definitely not. It's an ongoing conversation, and one that needs to continue.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you, the listener, something to think about, maybe some questions to explore further.
We always want to leave people with more to ponder.
Because at the end of the day, it's on all of us to stay informed, to ask the tough questions, to demand a system that is fair, a system that is built on integrity.
That's what matters.
That's all for today's deep dive, but thank you for joining us for this important conversation.